Hello and welcome everyone to our Thought Leader call here on March 3rd, Thursday evening. This event is brought to you by Metamorphosis Connections, and we're so grateful for everyone joining with us tonight to engage in and experience and get transformed through the brilliance of Cathryn Taylor. And I will say that I myself have experienced her since very early on in 2018. And she really was an angel in my world. And she came in at the right time and she opened up all the right doors. And her love and kindness and true gift and brilliance have made all the difference in my world. So I'm forever grateful to her. And I'm so excited and honored to be the host for tonight. So tonight's call is going to be all about how does one become a light worker? And Cathryn is going to dive in and share with us all of her brilliance. And we're going to start with a bit of Q&A with Cathryn, then she's going to do some real hands-on teaching with all of us. And then we're going to jump into what Cathryn has to offer in this year of 2022. So without further ado, let's get started. So Cathryn, what exactly does it take, or what exactly is a light worker?
Well, Brian, I think that term really became popular with the harmonic convergence, which was August 17th of 1987. And that was part of a Mayan prophecy that basically said, if we could get 144,000 light workers on the planet within the next 26 years, which obviously was 21 of 12. And that the plan was that if we could get 144 quote unquote light workers, which means somebody that holds the passion for raising their consciousness and holding kind of a heart-to-heart connection with the planet, with themselves, with the people in their lives, and they strive for that. And so it started then. And what a light worker really is somebody that holds that intention and really focuses on wanting to bring meaning to their lives, wanting to be part of the solution, part of really working with healing the planet and healing themselves. And so it's a light worker is someone who works with the light. And the light is basically our consciousness. It's the vibrational frequency with which we operate in the world. And the higher vibration we have, the higher our consciousness. And so we strive. And every time that we work with that energy, and every time that we master a challenge and we experience the world, and we might experience the contrast, but we take kind of the higher road, and not in a spiritual bypassing way. We can't kind of cheat and be Pollyanna about it. It's like a real light worker is someone who's not afraid to get their hands dirty in difficult emotions, but someone who knows how to process them and knows how to transmute them, because anything that we transmute within ourselves, we transmute on behalf of humanity. So a light worker is someone who's just really committed to that path and that endeavor.
Beautiful. So that kind of leads to this question, I guess. So how does one know that they're being called to be a light worker?
That's such a personal experience. But when you get to the place in your life when you're really wanting your life to matter, when you're moving beyond all the ego gratification of everything that you're acquiring, and there's a certain maturation of the ego where that progress is important. As human beings, we go through that ego-driven stage. But a light worker is someone who sees that they want to have something that means more than that. And so they are called to it. They feel like they are drawn to seeing that they're part of the bigger whole. But there's an accountability that really goes with it, because you really move from being a victim to your life to being a student of it. And when you're a student of it, then you're in the masses of really learning with other people. So there's a unity that happens. There's a disillusionment of the, or dissolving of that separation. We see that what happens to us also happens to others, and how we treat others is how we treat ourselves, and how we, treat others is how we come back and we want to be treated ourselves. But that even extends more to not only our relationships, our human relationships, but we develop more of an affinity for Mother Earth. We are much more aware of not littering. We're much more willing to pick up a paper, that's been thrown or skewed. We take it upon ourselves to be a custodian of the earth. And we develop such a richer experience with Mother Earth, because we come to realize that every mineral, every fiber, every aspect of our physical being has its counterpart in Mother Earth. We are extensions of Mother Earth. And we've been brought to this planet to really house the vibration of our soul. But we can't do that without having a respect for our vehicles. So a light worker really begins to develop, not perfectly, not in a nauseating way, but in a conscious way. We really begin to recognize what we're putting in our bodies, how we're treating our bodies. We begin to show up and treat our bodies like I always say in my work, our bodies is the closest thing to an infant that we have. And so I ask people, would you overstimulate an infant with coffee? It doesn't mean you can't have a cup of coffee, but would you give an infant 6, cups of coffee? Would you overstimulate? Would you rob your infant of getting the proper sleep? It's that self-care that comes with moving beyond being ego-driven to really expanding your consciousness so you can be what I call spirit-infused. So that's basically how you know, and it's the questions that you start asking yourself. Like I get a lot of people that call me and they'll want me to access their Akashic records, which is, Akashic record is the record of the soul. And I was trained to access them by the use of a sacred prayer. And with that prayer, what it does is it puts me in the vibration of the energy field called the Akash. Everything that's a living being has an Akashic record. So by using that prayer and stating the name of the being or the person, or even an address of a building or a business, everything has that record. And by accessing that, I can begin to get bigger information about what their soul purpose is, what their soul wants them to accomplish, if they're on their track. And so you start asking questions like that. You start wanting to pay attention to what your soul's doing and if you're showing up for it. And when we're real ego focused, we're not asking questions like that. It's more about what we're acquiring. And like I said, that's a natural state of our development. But each of us is here for a different reason. And so each of us comes into being a light worker at our own pace, according to what our soul charted. Some people never come into it. Some people are just here to get acclimated to the physical domain. So part of being a light worker is not judging where another person's at. I know when I first started my spiritual path, it's like I just kind of developed this attitude that anybody that wasn't on a spiritual path was just a waste of a human body. Well, how spiritual was that? And I soon realized through a series of my own meditations that, that's not being spiritual. That's assuming that I know what's better for them than their own soul does. And we're at all different places, and we come in with 1,000 different soul contracts. And so I really learned at that point that, I cannot judge where another person's at, because God only knows what they're here to learn. So all of those tenets go into being a light worker.
So, you were speaking a lot, Cathryn, about the relationship with ourselves and a lot of the factors that go into that, and the ability to start to transcend the ego. And I think moving in that direction, how does someone then start to have relationships or even deal with relationships with, let's say, loved ones who are not in the physical world anymore?
Those non-physical beings. Well, a lot of you have been drawn to my work by the recent book that I wrote, which is a spiritual memoir about the post-death relationship with my brother John. And a lot of that book talks about the necessity to be able to, what John Coltrane called, keep your mirror clean. You have to be able to kind of keep your negative feelings processed. You have to, it's not that you can't have them, but you have to have ways to really expand beyond them. And so in the non-physical world, when a loved one crosses over to the other side, then it takes them a while to separate out who they were in their ego form. But what I have found in my relationship with John, who died over 3 years ago, but also in a lot of work that I've done with numerous people who have asked me to open the records of a loved one and them and the relationship, and working with the unresolved issues. So many times when a loved one dies, there's things that we didn't get to say, or there's unfinished business, or there's just, things that just never we weren't able to deal with them because there wasn't the consciousness. The beauty about continuing a relationship with someone on the other side is they elevate out of their ego. And so they have kind of an expanded consciousness. And I really found that to be true with my brother. Now, it's not that he was unconscious in this lifetime, but I wouldn't call him somebody that really was operating on a spiritual level. And I mean, he had a good heart for sure, but he definitely had an ego. And the things that I saw with him once we continued this relationship, I mean, there's a reason that I called the book, I Think I Like You Better Dead, because all of a sudden with John on the other side, we were able to have that kind of relationship that on some levels I always longed for. But the reason that that was important, and I didn't find this out right away, because I came into that relationship already pretty savvy to relating to people on the other side. But there was one point where I was working with John, and of course, my main motivation at first was, God, show me the other side, take me, let me see what it's like. It was more wanting to get out of this plane and seeing what his world was like. And at one point he just said, "You're missing the point of our relationship." He said, "This isn't about me showing you what it's like over here. You're going to get plenty of that when you're on the other side. This is about a time in the history of our planet when we have been contracted. There's so many over here, Kath, that have been contracted to help those on the physical plane be motivated to raise their consciousness because of their love for us and their continuation of that relationship." And so it all of a sudden brought a real different dimension, not only to what John and I were doing, but to the purpose of our writing the book together, and the purpose of us offering these At the Veil sessions that John and I offer, where we're really helping people partner with people on the other side. And it improves them. Definitely the souls in the non-physical expand. And we are helping to raise the consciousness on the planet. But the real task is that it helps us hold a higher vibrational frequency, a higher vibrational signature. And we do that because we shared space with these loved ones. So we are more motivated to work through our doubts and our fears. And there are more of those. I mean, for me, it's pretty easy to expand and feel that I'm connecting with an angel. But to connect with my brother, who was on the other side when I so desperately wanted to, that called for me doing every piece of work on myself that I've helped other people work on for the last 40 years. Every tool that I've ever used to deal with my own doubts, my own fears, my own attachment. Because what I was really afraid of was that I was making it up, was that my attachment to not losing my brother was so strong that I was afraid that I was making it up. And so I had to work through that resistance. Well, as I worked through that resistance with John, I worked through it in all other areas of my life. I mean, all of a sudden, things began to amplify in so many areas. And all of a sudden, I had this ambassador on my side. In fact, at this point in our relationship, he takes credit for everything I do. It's like there's no initial thought I have anymore, but which is true and not true. But I've got like this ambassador. And our relationship has evolved to the point where we had to go through kind of separating as brother and sister, although there's a vibrational signature of us like that all the time. So at any point in time, when I do something that would mimic who we were as kids, there's some of my shenanigans, you know, that would have been laughed at by him. It's like he's still there to offer that laugh. But it's expanded so much more that literally, because of multidimensionality, I am never without John. Because the minute I think about him, he's there every moment. Because once they go to the other side, they're not limited to one expression of themselves. So there's this myth that if we continue relationships with those on the other side, that we're going to hold their soul back. And what I've been told by him and other sources that I've worked with is that that's not true because of multidimensionality. We never keep them from doing anything, you know. So he's had other incarnations even since he's gone to the other side. That doesn't keep him from being in relationship to me. So the reason that that's been so powerful is because that invited me, and I've seen this with people that I've worked with, where they're more willing to deal with some of the gut-wrenching blocks that keep us from becoming a light worker, that keep us from really expanding to that higher realm. We're more motivated to, because we want to continue the relationship. So it's very powerful. And if you're called to do that, then on some level, you and your loved one have some sort of contract to do that. Not everybody's called to that. Not everybody's called to be a light worker. But you know that you are by the questions that you ask, by the longings that you have, by the spiritual pursuits that you follow.
So, Cathryn, you mentioned a moment with John where he said something to the degree of, right now, this period of time is a very important one for you, Cathryn, and I to be having this relationship. Now, how would you say that relates to this calling for someone to be a light worker? How important is it right now for people to really heed that call?
Well, in all the spiritual studies that I've done, especially since I've developed this relationship with John, it really is true. Kyron talks about this. Abraham talks about this. Alicia Powers talks about this. You know, all the big healers talk about how the veil is really thinning. And the veil is thinning because we are raising our consciousness. As human beings, we're in charge of that. This is the only place in all the cosmos where we have personal choice. When they go to the other side, they don't have personal choice. They don't have resistance. Their soul continues to grow, but not to the degree that we can make headway, because when we choose to follow the heart and to follow the light and to bring in that higher consciousness, then that's like 1,000 times, you know, more magnanimous, because we are going against the resistance. And so we're really choosing light and dark. We're really working with light and dark. And so this is a time, I mean, look at what's going on in our planet. You know, look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Look what's been going on our planet for the last 2 to 3 years. It's like, you know, as humanity, we were brought to a complete halt. And for those 2 months, remember those first 2 months when the world shut down? Just remember how close we all felt, because we had one enemy. The world and humanity had one enemy, and that was the virus. And then that only lasted a couple months, you know, and then once we bring in the light, we start bringing in the shadow. I'm from Minneapolis. It happened here with George Floyd. Shattered that whole thing, as across the planet, all of the racial unrest happened, and the political unrest, and it's just continued to evolve. But there's a purpose to that. And that happens in our own individual work as well. And this is why we have to have ways to process it. The higher our consciousness is, the more we reflect our own shadow. So we have to have the tools to deal with that shadow. And it's not kind of crushing it out. It's not doing it from an ego way of just annihilating it. We have to befriend it, and we have to bring that shadow part into the light. That's a lot of the inner child work. That's a lot of the soul work. That's a lot of what I'm going to talk about when we get to the 7-layer healing process that I'm going to be offering. That's a lot of what I'm going to teach in the teaching segment. So we have to have the tools. We have to know how to grieve. We have to befriend grief, because grief is a process we are involved in every minute of our day. Think about it. Either we're anxious, we're trying to fix something, we're pissed off or irritated, we're sad, or we're accepting and resolved. At any one point in time, we are in one of those stages of grief. And now we have a 6th stage. We finally realized the power of those stages, and that what comes from really processing those losses. And we have plenty of losses in this last couple of years. Everybody on this planet is dealing with some form of post-traumatic stress. Everybody lost something. We have to have ways to process that. We have to have ways to cope with it. And those stages of grief are a beautiful way to do that. We can't avoid them. We go through them anyway, so we might as well do it consciously.
So that really sets up, Cathryn, for us to embrace some of the tools that you're going to share with us tonight, and really lead us into your teaching for this evening, and guide us through what you'd like to share. I know that that I, along with everyone's very excited to jump into that.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is that, again, I've been saying, all night, we have to have ways to process this. And some of you know about the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer called I probably never say it right, it's the Ho'oponopono. But Dr. Hugh Lin is one that popularized that. And he was a psychiatrist in Hawaii. And he went to this mental health facility, and it was a facility that nobody wanted to touch. And he went in, and I don't know how many patients there were, but he went in, and the way that he healed them is he took their file. He never met with them at all. He interacted with them, but he never did a session with them. He sat in his office, he took their files, and he read the atrocious things that they had done in their mental illness. And he used the Ho'oponopono prayer. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. He just kept saying that over and over and over and over again. And in 4 years, I think that's accurate, he had healed every patient in that facility without ever seeing them. Now, why is that so important? It's important because one of the ways that we can really begin to work with our dissonant feelings, our negative feelings, is through using the prayer, but also using EFT tapping. And so one of the things I'm going to teach you tonight is how to really work with what really are the first 2 layers of the 7-layer healing process. The first layer is stepping into empowering your adult self. You have to become your own healer. So that means you need a point of reference for what it means to really feel empowered. And I'm not talking powerful. I'm not talking ego-driven. I'm talking spiritually infused. So the first exercise I'd like to have you do is just take a moment. In fact, this would be a good time to grab a piece of paper, because in a minute I'm going to have you write some stuff down. But for right now, have your piece of paper and your pen in front of you. And just close your eyes and take a couple deep breaths. Breathe deep into your belly. And take a nice exhale. Breathe in. Breathe out. And now put your left hand on your heart and your right hand on your third eye like this. And again, breathe into your heart and breathe out your third eye. And what you're doing with this breathing exercise is you are creating heart and mind coherence. In order to be present, in order to be involved in your most illuminated adult self, you need to be connected, heart and mind. Breathe in, breathe out. Now shake your hands out and just put your hands on your lap. Keep your eyes closed. And just think of a time, and if you can't think of one, invent one, where you felt totally empowered, where it was just one of those peak moments, where everything felt like it was in alignment. Everything felt like you were just, at the top of your game. You were connected to all that is. You were aware of everything that was around you. There was almost like no separation between you and anything else in your environment. That peak moment when you felt so embedded in the vibration of your higher self, your soul, your guardians. And just notice where you are when you feel that. Take a snapshot of that in your mind's eye and then give it texture. You first have the experience and then you embody it. And you embody it by using all of your senses. So as you're in that peak moment, notice what smells are around you. What things are touchable? What things do you see? What colors? Animals, things that are alive. What's the taste in your mouth? All of the senses, just really embody that moment. And then hold that experience. And if you can hold that experience for 68 seconds, you give the universe enough time to create that which you're holding. And so hold it, and I'm going to count in my mind 68 seconds, because that will give the universe enough time to create it and to begin to gather the necessary components for you to retain that sense of empowerment, illumination, because that is the healer within you. That's the part of you that holds compassion, that can experience unconditionality, great compassion, great love, absence of judgment. Just hold it for another 20 seconds. And you are giving that vibrational signature to the universe to begin to manifest and hold that as an energy blueprint of who you are. And that is your empowered, illuminated self. That's the part of you that you repeatedly come back to so that you can create a healing. Now, in order to heal, you have to give form to the part of you that holds your challenges. So I want you to just step out of the empowered self for a minute. And I want you to let yourself go back to a recent time when you felt some challenging emotion. It may have been fear. It may have been rage. It may have been, doubt. It may have been sense of survival, a fear of nuclear war, a fear of not surviving. Whatever your brand of tension is, try to give form to that. And as you do that, I want you to write down on the paper just one-word descriptions of the challenging feelings that you're aware of. You are identifying one of your fragile selves that feels scared. And it's that fragile self, or it's one of the fragile selves, that keeps you from holding the light. It's one of your fragile selves that you really need to bring into the light. And so feel that. And put it on paper, because when you put it on paper, you get it out of your physical form and you can interact with it. Part of the healing, once you've given form to your illuminated self, is that you can then begin to repair and heal the more vulnerable parts of you. Because all of our fears, all of our doubts, all of our angers, those come from other times and other places. Sometimes they're fueled by other lifetimes. But it's the same process, whether you're dealing with an inner child or an aspect of who you were 5 days ago. It's still a lower vibrational expression. And the way you heal it is through the interaction between the empowered self that can separate from the wound. And one of the ways you separate is you write it down. Why? Because whatever you write on paper, you externalize. And in order to heal, you have to externalize the pain. You have to see that as a more vulnerable part of you. In the 7-layer healing process, one of the ways that we work with that is through the use of pronouns. So when you're talking about the illuminated self, you're going to own that as the I. But when you're talking about a more vulnerable part of you, you're going to start referring to it as he or she. Because you want to create a separation so that you can respond instead of collapse. When we collapse into the negative feelings, then we have regressed. And we're trying to cope with the situation with the same coping mechanisms that we had at a younger time, a younger situation. So instead of collapsing, you want to separate. And you separate by noticing when you have these negative feelings. A classic inner child intervention is for you to have a point of reference for your illuminated self. and the ability to identify when you're out of that vibrational frequency. And at that moment, your operative question is, who inside is feeling this? And what is it that you need from me? By phrasing it that way, you're externalizing it. You are separating, you're getting the duality between the healer within you and the fragile part that needs to be healed. So now you've got the teeter-totter of what you need to work with. And I'm going to teach you a little bit of tapping. Some of you know it, some of you don't. So I'm going to go through it, and then we're going to do a tapping sequence, talking to that wounded self from the empowered self. So what EFT tapping is, it's a self-administered form of acupressure. And instead of using needles, we use tapping on different endpoints. And we just tap a couple times on different points, and I'm going to show you those points. But an EFT sequence usually starts out by what's called setting the intention. And you do that by tapping on the karate. This is the karate point. And you take your 4 fingers in one hand and you just start tapping. And these are usually even though statements, because what you're doing, and this, by the way, is a form to rewire your brain, because what you're doing is you're taking a challenging feeling and you're pitting it against an affirmation. So an example of that is just continue to tap, and you're all muted, right? So just repeat after me. Even though I have a part of me who suddenly began to feel fear, and I'm not even sure to what it's responding, but my stomach got tight. I felt anxious. I may have felt anger. I'm not sure what its origin is, but I want to love myself anyway, and I want to respond to that part of me with compassion and acceptance and love. So even though I was feeling great, and all of a sudden, I dropped into this real negativity, I want to respond to that part of myself. I want to respond to his or her pain. So that instead of collapsing, I can respond and help that part of me feel safe and come home. Okay, so shake your hands out. Now, even there, I used the different pronouns. When we're talking about a fragile one, we're using words. If we're talking directly to it, we're using you. If we're talking about it, we're then talking he, she. In the second layer of healing, it's all about making the separation. The third stage of healing, the third layer of healing, is when we really interact. But the second layer of healing is when we're just externalizing it. So that tapping sequence would look like this. Now, we've already set it up. We've already stated that there's a feeling within us of a part of us that feels challenged. So there's the energy that is compromising our light, compromising our consciousness. And it's contributing to the disruption on the planet. The one thing I've really learned is that whatever I neutralize within me, I'm neutralizing it on behalf of humanity, because every feeling is a universal feeling. If I can heal it for myself, send that healing to the universe to be used in the mandala of healing, then I am cleaning it up on all ends. So the tapping would go like this. The first tapping place is the corner of the eyebrow. So you just need one hand. You can use two, but you just need one. And then it's side of the eye, under the eye, upper lip, lower lip, collarbone, under the arm, wrist, top of the head. Now, I'm going to say statements while we're going around that, and just do what I do and say what I say is the easiest way for you to learn it. All of this negativity, can you repeat that? This anxiety, all of his or her anger, I'm not sure where it came from. I may have just picked it up from the universe. It may just be in the air. But my body is feeling the emotion. And I, as the adult self, I want to neutralize it here and now on behalf of my fragile self, on behalf of my friends and family, on behalf of humanity and Mother Earth herself. I now choose to neutralize this feeling of angst. And by tapping, while I'm focusing on this feeling, I am neutralizing it. Because I'm sending an electrical impulse through my body, and it's landing on that energetic disturbance that gets glitched in my energy system anytime I feel a negative feeling. And if I talk about the feeling while I'm tapping, I'm neutralizing it. I'm being able to untie the knots of tension, like untying the knots in a golden chain. And the more I tap, the more I neutralize. And pretty soon, just like a golden chain finally relaxes with that last knot, pretty soon, the knots of tension in my meridian system collapse. And I can relate to that younger self. Or I can just neutralize the feeling and return to a state of calm. I choose to feel calm now. I choose to replace that challenging feeling with a feeling of peace, hope, and calm. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's kind of a demonstration of how we use tapping, kind of like Dr. Hugh Lin did. And I've even used tapping with the Ho'oponopono prayer. So you can combine tapping with almost anything. Tapping, again, neutralizes anything that you're focusing on. But if you're focusing on something that's positive, then it reinforces it. So you can use it to amplify the feeling of your empowered self, and you can use it to neutralize the challenging emotions of your more fragile selves. And everything that is going to go wrong for you, you're going to feel it in your body. Your body does not lie. And so it's important to learn how to communicate with your body. And part of being a light worker, part of raising your consciousness, is getting better and better of having kind of a higher and higher bar of what you'll allow yourself to feel. So many of us operate on a high level of tension that we don't even realize that we're tense. We don't even realize it. But the more we meditate, the more we neutralize, the more we clear our force field so that we can feel this expanded state, the higher the bar is and the less tolerance we have to hold any negativity. So you'll get to the place where right away something gets triggered. Boy, what just happened? Okay, who inside's feeling this? What is it that you need from me? You backtrack. Or if you don't even want to go that far, you just start tapping. You know, all of this anxiety, want to neutralize it. Because remember, by tapping, you're sending an electrical impulse through your body. So whatever you're focusing on, you are being able to untie that knot. So tapping and using the Ho'oponopono prayer and meditating, exercising, all of those activities, all of those self-caring activities, journaling is a beautiful way to get to know yourself. Journaling with your least dominant hand connects you to the pain of the inner child, but it also connects you to your soul. Sitting in front of a mirror and rocking back and forth. Let's say that something's happened and you are really triggered. I healed my whole 6-year-old. This is how I started the inner child work in 1984. And there was nothing written on inner child work when I started doing this. I had to create it. And I just started rocking. I was a family therapist, so I knew how to deal with the family within me. And I just started rocking. And I started talking from that vulnerable side. But the one thing that I did is I kept my eye just eye to eye. I didn't look at any other part of my body. I didn't judge whether my hair looked good or whether my outfit looked crazy. I was just eye to eye, eye to eye. And what I noticed is, first of all, and this was long before I even knew about tapping. I didn't find out about tapping until early 2000. But just by rocking, there was that self-soothing activity. And I even bought a teddy bear. I have that teddy bear to this day. And I just rocked with it. It was like my inner child. And I would just speak about what it was that I was feeling. There were tears sometimes, there was anger. But what always inevitably happened is that I would discharge the negativity and it would cycle back. And all of a sudden, I would feel that adult within me, sometimes the higher self within me, responding. And it's the response to our wounded ones that heals them. And when we heal ourselves and we progressively get more and more compassionate with ourselves, more and more accepting of ourselves, we get more and more compassionate with others. We have more and more love and compassion to offer the world. So we then begin holding that. And one of the important things about being a light worker, oh, it scared me. My husband just walked in the door. One of the things that is really important at this point in time is that we need to be receptor sites for all the light that's coming in from the universe. And we need to hold that. And the only way we can hold it is when we are vibrating at that higher level. So we hold that. And so that's why it's even more important at this point in time to really work with your energy, to really be present. If you want to contribute to healing the crisis in the Ukraine and Russia, heal that division within yourself. Or like Charlie did, she's on the phone or on the call tonight, and we just did group together. And one of the things she shared, which I thought was beautiful, and she gave me permission to share this, is she was doing a meditation and she was bringing in the light. And it's one of the Alicia Powers meditations where if some of you have read my book, you read how John introduced me to her. And part of the meditation at the end is there's all these light workers. There's so many light workers, you guys, on the other side that are bringing light to the planet. But is if there's nobody to receive it, then it doesn't anchor in. But in this meditation, she was taken to a place and there's healing beds. And at the end of it, we were invited. It's one that she does every month. But with Charlie, she was invited to bring in 3 other people. And repeatedly, she saw herself bring in Putin to get healing from these creator beings. So that's a way that we can begin to really impact and be part of the solution. But we have to be present. We have to have the tools to keep our own mirror clean, because we can't show up. I saw that over and over and over again in my building the relationship with John, that the times when I tried to connect with him and I was out of sync with myself, it was just really jagged. But boy, those times when I took time to really be in sync with myself and expand to the highest vibration I could get to, and then connect with him, it was so pure. And it went beyond just John and I. And so there's a real need now for light workers, because as a planet, and this has been going on for the last decade, because of technology, we're operating on such a different level. It's really hard to bury our heads in the sand. We're hit by it. We go to the gym and we're hit by it. We go to our internet and we're hit by it. It's like, it's really hard to get away from it. And we have a couple choices. We can act like it doesn't exist. We can spiritually bypass it and act like we're above it. Or we can begin to be part of really cleaning it up. And that cleanup begins with us. The cleanup begins with us noticing where we're out of sync and being familiar with the stages of grief so that we can process them and process our own losses and have tools like the tools that I mentioned. Tapping obviously is one of my favorites. EMDR is good. TRE, tension and trauma releasing, is another way you get the energy out of your body. There's so many ways now to get help. But what I found is there are certain soul themes that nobody else can take away for us. I don't care how much violet flame you do. I don't care how many massages you do. I don't care how much emotion code you do. If there's a spiritual purpose to your pain, you got to process it. You got to own it, because that's how you and your soul grow. And that's where you have to have the tools to do it. So how are we doing on time? Okay.
We're doing very good, Cathryn. I think first I just want to acknowledge that incredible guided work that you just did. It was exceptional, as it always is, and to really acknowledge that you've spent the better part of your life doing so much of the work for the people who are called to be a light worker. And you've created a tool belt, and you've created the ability to speak the language that allows people to be receptive to it. Oftentimes, because of your diligence and commitment to this work, you really act as someone that can open that door and give someone a kind entry point to this work. And so I know you've developed a program that really infuses and synergizes all of these tools. And so maybe in the last few minutes here, if you could deliver the essence of what that program is and maybe some of the details, that would be a great way to wrap up.
Okay. Well, first of all, the 7-layer healing process is represented in my book called Share the Gift. It's 498 pages. It's available on Amazon, and it's got every tool I've ever developed in it. But it also showcased my 7-layer healing process, which I developed in 2006. And I was inspired to develop it by combining the laws of attraction with EFT. So every layer, each layer is administered and explained through the idea of how it is impacted by not only the law of attractions, but also the new brain science. I went back later in 2014 and integrated that in it. So it's really the most effective, versatile, comprehensive program that I've ever created. It's got everything in it. The first layer I introduced you to tonight, and that is empowering the adult self. And we start by exactly what we did tonight, by getting a point of reference for your most empowered self. And we build on that. And there's a whole formula that we use, and there are sequences that we use to empower that. And anytime that I begin a healing session on myself, and anytime I recommend that you begin a healing session, you always want to do an EFT clearing to get your adult self present for the healing. And what that involves is setting everything else aside and just being really present to respond to whatever the dissonance is. It's like what you're going for is the contrast. If you're a follower of the teachings of Abraham, they talk a lot about how the way we grow is with contrast. Contrast inspires us to grow, inspires us to move beyond something. So we have to get our hands dirty. We have to get our hearts dirty. We have to have ways to neutralize it. And so layer one is all about empowering the adult self. Layer two is what we talked about, which you begin to realize that you're not a victim of your pain. You can be a student of it. That just like those on the other side have multidimensionality, we are multidimensional beings. We are complex beings. At no point in time is there just one set of feelings that we have. And we are not taught how to deal with that duality. We're just not taught. We're set up to think that we're just one set of feelings. And so if we have contrasting feelings, then we give all of our power to that. And the second layer is about getting that separation, getting that teeter-totter, so that you can acknowledge the challenging, vulnerable, fragile self and begin to work with it. And ultimately, in my work, that leads us back to suspended parts of your soul, where in other lifetimes, you experience that same kind of trauma. And there's an energetic blueprint of you in another time and another space that is pulsing post-traumatic stress. So in this lifetime, you had a cross father that intimidated you. In your current life, you have a boss that gets authoritative and scares you. You react to that. And somewhere in another lifetime, you were killed by some authoritative figure in your life. And that aspect of your soul never got to the light. And so when your boss yells at you, and all those times when you say, God, I am just overreacting to this. It's just, I'm over the top. That's because you've activated a soul fragment. So layer two is all about separating and really owning your own multidimensionality. Layer three, and this is all done with tapping. Layer three is when you develop a relationship with that inner child. And at layer three, I have a 30-day program that I register people for, and you get an 8 to 10 minute video every day in your email that's just about safety or boundaries or 30 different topics. And you are creating a relationship with your inner child, because you can't heal your fragile self until you have a relationship with it. Then layer four is when we go in and do the deep healing. And there's like a 19-step process of how you do that. And I teach you how to do that. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Layer five is when we merge back. It's like every fragment of ourselves that had to split off because of pain, it's like it had a counterpart. Like every time we felt abandoned, we lost the ability to feel in union with something. Every time we felt betrayed, our ability to trust was contaminated. And so as we heal these parts of self, we can merge them back in. And we all of a sudden begin to have the spontaneity and the joy. The purpose of this work is to feel joy. And yes, it's difficult to do. And it takes a lot of courage to do it. But who you can be when you really claim it is just so much bigger, so much more vital in your life. Layer six is when I take you through the process of rewiring your brain, reprogramming your heart, and reconfiguring the electromagnetic field around you. So now you've created a new mandala of energy around you, which contributes to you attracting that which you want. We can only attract that which our most vulnerable self feels we deserve. That's right in a quote in the first page of the book, is that you can do that. And then 7 is the 7th layer is when we give 15% back of our healing back to the universe, because we have to contribute to the mandala of healing. The program that I'm offering, I'm only taking 10 people because it involves 7 months, and we have one class a month on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And you get the written material, and you get a copy of the book. So some of the written material is redundant, but what the book doesn't have is the links, the video and audio links that bring these sequences and stages alive. And then you get a 90-minute session with me. And the program starts on equinox, spring equinox, March 22nd. It's the only Tuesday that's the 4th, because I wanted to start on equinox and end on equinox. So we go 7 times, and it ends on September 20th with the fall equinox. Why? Because the equinoxes are the only days of the year that we are totally balanced between the light and dark. And so that's exactly what this endeavor does, is teaches you a way to embrace the light and dark within you, because you're no longer afraid you're not going to be able to cope, because you have the tools to do so. So if you're at all interested, call me. Once I get this started, even if you're interested down the road, it'll be intact, and you don't have to join the group. You can join individually. So it's going to be, it's a way that I work with people anyway, but that structure will be involved probably long term. At least that's what my brother John tells me. So anyway,
well,
that's it. That's all I've got. That's all she wrote for tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Cathryn. Your brilliance always shines. The light is true and real. And I had the pleasure of looking out on people's faces during our time together tonight. And you could see your light reflected in their faces. It was really beautiful. So for anyone that's interested, please contact Cathryn. There's really nothing more dynamic that's being offered on planet Earth right now. And Cathryn is a true guide. So thank you, Cathryn, for your brilliance. Thank you for inviting us all to be compassionate with ourselves. That's really what I got tonight. And it's such a simple thing that is truly extraordinary. And thank you for giving that to all of us and to everyone that watches the recording and beyond. So on behalf of Metamorphosis Connections, thank you all for joining, and have an absolutely beautiful night. Go out and be kind. Thank you, Cathryn.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.